Imagine yourself living a life of complete injustice,
where no one understands what's truly right,
where you sacrifice your life and starve yourself all in the hope that someone will finally understand what you're fighting for.
And you still fight, even if you're being tortured and force-fed in a jail cell by some men who don't understand that you aren't living a life nearly as equal as theirs.
This is what it was like for certain individuals such as Alice Paul and the women she recruited to join her to be a part of the women's suffrage movement and take part in the peaceful protests and hunger strikes. Women's suffrage movement went from the years 1848 to 1920. The word suffrage means the right to vote in political elections, meaning that women's suffrage was the struggle for the right of women to vote and run for office. It was an overall part of the women's rights movement.
Leaders that took part in this movement were women named Alice Paul, Susan B. Anthony, and 50 more. During this video, much will be answered about women's suffrage and how great the impact in nonviolent protests help achieve the right to vote.
Starting in 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention in the United States took place in Seneca Falls, New York. About 300 people attended, and they all signed a declaration of sentiments and resolutions that included the goals they wanted to achieve, like the goal of achieving the sacred rights of franchise. These meetings were then held regularly. From then, many creative peaceful protests were made to put a mark on history.
Our research question for today is how great was the impact in nonviolent protests in achieving the right to vote?
One of the most famous protests was held on November 15, 1917 by a group of 33 courageous women who gathered in front of the White House with signs in their hands asking for the right to vote. Even if these women were innocent and nonviolent, they were arrested and later even taken to a workhouse in Virginia. In 1973, historian Sherna Gluck interviewed Ernestine Keller, one of the 33 suffragists, about her first-hand experiences in the workhouse. Ernestine explained how she and the 33 women came up with a plan to not work at all as a way to say that they did not deserve to be arrested, so they did not deserve to work. When they were taken to the workhouse, they joined with another 9 to 12 women that were already there, told them the plan, and they all agreed. When they were taken to the workroom, they all sat with their hands in their laps and did not work for 26 days.
This answers a question on how great nonviolent protests are because the women's suffrage movement got the attention of the president and the White House, even though it was not the reaction they wanted, because President Wilson turned them down. However, they were still seen and made it into the articles. The signs that they were holding say, "Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage? Votes for women," and "Mr. President, how long must women wait for the liberty?"
Another marking nonviolent protest was the bra burning protest held by second-wave feminists on September 7, 1968. Approximately 400 women were part of this movement. This protest took place outside the Atlantic Convention Center while the Miss America pageant was going on. They all circled around a trash can that they called the Freedom Trash Can, in which they all threw objects that symbolized feminine apprehension like high heels, makeups, bras, and others. The organizer of this event, Robin Morgan, said that the purpose of this march was to protest against the unrealistic beauty standards for women.
The following videos are actual footage from the bra burning protest. You can see how determined and happy the women are to make a change. This goes into a category of nonviolent protest because women are not being violent. They have the right to get rid of their own personal belongings. But let's fast forward for a minute and see how people are fighting for equality even now. This is a video clip from Michelle Obama and her peaceful way of saying women deserve better and they deserve the right to have the same freedom and equality as men.
See, on Tuesday at the White House, we celebrated the International Day of the Girl and Let Girls Learn. And it was a wonderful celebration. It was the last event that I'm going to be doing as First Lady for Let Girls Learn. And I had the pleasure of spending hours talking to some of the most amazing young women you will ever meet, young girls here in the US and all around the world. And we talked about their hopes and their dreams. We talked about their aspirations. See, because many of these girls have faced unthinkable obstacles just to attend school, jeopardizing their personal safety, their freedom, risking the rejection of their families and communities. So I thought it would be important to remind these young women how valuable and precious they are. I wanted them to understand that the measure of any society is how it treats its women and girls.
So, after taking in all this information, let's refresh. What did we learn today? How great were nonviolent protests?
And how did it affect women's right to vote? Basically, we learned that a peaceful protest is the act of expressing disapproval through a statement or action without the use of violence. We learned that women's suffrage movement was a struggle for the right of women to vote and run for office, and we learned that nonviolent protests were so effective and impacting that in the end, the goal that for most seemed impossible was achieved. Justice was made for women and they were finally allowed to vote in the United States. The women's suffrage movement was an extremely significant happening in history, as now the United States can vote not just as men, but as a whole united nation.